Hi, I'm Mason Fickert, and I'm going to be giving my persuasive speech on performance-enhancing drugs. What if I told you that 1 in 20 teenage athletes nationwide were liars? Well, unfortunately, this is a sad reality in the world of sports. There's a new enemy within the domain of athletics, and that enemy is performance-enhancing drugs. Performance-enhancing drugs are drugs that have been around since the 1960s and are used to improve the physical qualities of a person. Now more than ever, athletes are relying on performance-enhancing drugs to fuel themselves through athletics and no longer are intimidated by the consequences that they provide. Many athletes are claiming that using these drugs in sports is justified by the spirit of competing and the natural urge for humans to want to improve themselves. However, using drugs in sports is nevertheless unfair towards other athletes and is also a dangerous alternative to training without them. Within the past few years, performance-enhancing drugs have reached their spike, and they're becoming more common among athletes nationwide and worldwide, especially in teenagers. As you can see in this visual here, this is a type of performance-enhancing drug, steroids in this case, where you inject it into your system with a syringe. And then this is also a list of other performance-enhancing drugs, such, obviously steroids is there, and then testosterone, Darunthal, and all of those other types of drugs. It's estimated that 15 million Americans have used performance-enhancing drugs in the last few decades, and that number is only increasing. In fact, performance-enhancing drugs are becoming fundamental in competing in sports nowadays, and athletic officials are either secretly allowing the drugs to be used, or they're unaware that the drugs are being used at all. As a result, athletes are getting away with using performance-enhancing drugs, and victories are being earned that perhaps should have never been earned. There are many overlying causes as to why the increase in performance-enhancing drugs has been occurring. For one, the level of competitiveness within athletes is becoming increasingly larger every second, and many feel pressured to keep up. As a result, athletes are focusing on more the aspect of dosing on drugs than actually putting forth the effort to gain the results for their athletic abilities. It represents a picture here. These athletes here, it's like a comic, and it represents athletes who use performance-enhancing drugs to get where they are, and it's obviously not very satisfying as just, actually putting forth the effort and gaining, your abilities. And then this is an exaggeration of the competitiveness that people are having towards sports, and that they'll use drugs even to get this big, like to that point. Athletes have become so focused on competing and improving themselves that they no longer feel intimidated by the rules against performance-enhancing drugs. The mentality of athletes now is that performance-enhancing drugs are fine for them to use as long as they aren't harming anyone else. What they don't realize is they are harming other athletes in a way, and they're definitely harming themselves. I think we can all agree on one thing, and that's that performance-enhancing drugs is a way of cheating. Athletes who use performance-enhancing drugs automatically have an unfair advantage over any other athlete who isn't using them, and are preventing non-using athletes from keeping up to using athlete standards. Officials are now starting to realize this later, and as a result, they're revoking titles and athletic memberships from athletes that they catch using. This is one man that they caught. His name is Lance Armstrong. You probably have heard of him. He is a 7-time Tour de France champion, and he was caught using performance-enhancing drugs. So, as a result, he got all of his titles revoked from him. This is only in some cases, though, and many athletes are still getting by on using them. Another issue is that most of the athletes don't consider is health problems that come with using performance-enhancing drugs. Performance-enhancing drugs are in no way good for your bodily systems, and they've been known to cause muscle, brain, and even heart damage amongst athletes, as you can see here in that area. Some of these cases have even been known to cause lifelong bodily damage to some athletes. So what can we do to prevent the succession of performance-enhancing drugs from continuing? Well, for one, sports officials need to advertise more awareness towards why performance-enhancing drugs are banned and how dangerous they can be. If we don't send the message that these drugs can have the potential to shorten your lifespan, athletes will not have any motivation to stop using them. Drug tests also need to be administered in every sport and frequently. When it comes to performance-enhancing drugs, there needs to be a zero-tolerance policy, and anyone who has ingested these drugs should immediately be ejected from the sports association that they are involved in. And finally, advertisements on how to stay healthy and eat right need to be launched and need to illustrate the fact that you don't need drugs to maintain and improve natural athletic ability. It's much better to improve your skills without drugs, and it also provides more satisfying health results. So, what can we, as in us here now, do to help this issue? Well, I would encourage all of you to take a stand against the growing influence of drugs by working hard, staying healthy, and encouraging your friends to be the best they can be without the use of drugs. And then we're one step closer to returning the way that sports were meant to be, which is natural. Overall, it can be said that our society is taking an unfortunate turn towards performance-enhancing drugs, and athletes are becoming too blinded by their urge to improve and their competitiveness, and they're forgetting about what it really means to play sports the way that they're meant to be played. The best way to get sports back on track is to remind athletes of how much easier and simpler it was whenever sports were played back in the day just for fun and not to just compete and win. Because in the end, you have to ask yourself, is winning really so important that you sacrifice your honesty and health to achieve it?